Hey everybody, Tyler here. Before we get started today, we read two stories. I read two quotes from two stories. They're both very long. I wanted to put them in the description so you could read along because we don't usually read super long quotes, but both stories are pretty long in this one. But they have a lot of stuff and I didn't want to cut it out. So if you want to read along, the quotes are either in the description or in the comments below the YouTube video or beneath in the SoundCloud description somewhere. They're down there. If you would like to read along, just FYI. Thanks for listening. And welcome in to the Gaming Discourse. I am Tyler Frater alongside Richard De La Cruz.
Hello.
And Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Good evening.
It is Monday, March 11th, 2024. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse. Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse. You can support us for $247, $10. Get your name in the video credits, early access to our videos, access to our Discord server, and more stuff like that. Richard, I have neglected to mention that you're still doing Gaming Discourse FM.
Yeah, yes, I am.
You're going to change the name some point.
It's
coming.
It's going to happen. Actually, so I am very terrible at doing my job, my second job, my third job. And I actually passed my year anniversary of doing it, like I think last month, early last month. So yeah, I've been just 40.
So right now, yeah, it's called Gaming Discourse FM, but we'll change the name at some point.
We'll notify people.
And it'll all be here. We'll talk about it.
Gaming Discourse.
We're all still together.
Yeah, so we're all fine. We're all fine here now. How are you?
How are you?
We have news. We have games. We'll talk. We've got some spicy takes about some stuff WB executives have said. Peter Moore kicked in the door to IG and said, "I'm here to burn up some fresh hot takes with a fry pan."
Peter less.
Okay, so Connor, why don't you tell us what you've been playing first? Go ahead.
I have been stomping bugs and spilling oil in the name of democracy.
Have any of us played anything but Helldivers 2?
Yeah, I played a little bit of something else. Yeah.
Okay. So do we have any new revelations about Helldivers 2 or opinions about the ongoing debates about the Helldivers 2 controversies? Go ahead. Take it away.
I love the mech so much. And people have been complaining about when they're turning and firing the rocket exploding because they're thinking it's like spawning inside the mech, or they think like there's a collision happening. But what's happening in reality is when you turn the mech, the rocket pod points down. So if you turn and shoot at the same time, you shoot at your feet with a rocket.
Okay, I get it.
Weird. Okay, I have noticed that.
Yeah, it's happened to a few people. That's happened to me several times. I personally love the mech. I think it's a great support fire platform. People were expecting it to come in and be like a main battle tank when it's really just like a Humvee with a machine gun and grenade launcher on it.
Yeah, it seemed. I don't know. I haven't used the mech a whole lot. And the missions that I have used it seemed pretty powerful. I have no idea what complaints are online. I'm sure there's some good ones, and I'm sure there's ones that are...
It's almost all bad.
Is it all?
No, just people who are brain dead.
Oh, okay. So I haven't had an issue with it. When I think about... Because Helldivers is not... When I think about the things that I don't like about the mech, it's not that I think the game should be changed. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Like... It takes like a second or two for your gun to spool up before you fire, right? Your machine gun.
Yeah.
And that's fine because Helldivers 2 has never been about player convenience. It's always been about making things difficult on you. Your reload animations take like 6 seconds, and if you do one thing in the middle of it, your guy has to
got to start over
or whatever. It's segmented, so you don't have to start over, luckily, but you do have to continue it at some point to finish the reload section or whatever. So there's a bunch of stuff like that in Helldivers, which is not necessarily unique to Helldivers 2 because that comes over from the first Helldivers, which was more of like a comedy game where everything was kind of silly and where you would, you were under pressure and you had to press the right keypad sequences and stuff like that. So when I think about the things that I don't like about the mech, most of it is like stuff that makes sense in the context of it being a game that wants to inconvenience you and be difficult. So I don't know. So, but are there any substantial arguments you think about?
No.
No. Are there? What are the most prominent unsubstantial arguments in your guys' opinions?
You can go ahead, Connor, if you have.
Well, I was gonna say. So with a lot of the complaints about how the mech works, people not understanding that it's designed to work in the reality of the game. It is a weapons platform developed by the lowest bidder for a government that doesn't care about its soldiers. You are cannon fodder being thrown at a wall until the wall breaks.
You're T-34.
Yeah, Helldivers are expendable. When you boot up the game for the first time and you go through the tutorial, if you look at the screen that displays a whole bunch of information really quick, it says the average age of a Helldiver is 18.3 years old.
Sure, yeah.
So, I mean, Helldivers don't live long, and so it's no surprise that the platforms and means of warfare that are provided for them are just there to get them there, secure the objective, and then if they can, get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that because it does fit with the overall narrative of the game, and that's an interesting point. I think a lot of people would disagree just because they don't care about the Helldivers, like the context surrounding it being like this big fascist dystopia. But I think that's part of what makes Helldivers fun, is that so much of like your equipment and stuff is disposable or like rendered useless really easily or something like that. And I think that's really unique about it too. I don't know. And when I think about other games, there's not a lot of games similar to Helldivers. I think one game somewhat similar to Helldivers is like Earth Defense Force, because I've never played Earth Defense Force. Yeah. But that one, I think, is, now that I think about it, is actually oddly similar to Helldivers. But even in Earth Defense Force, it's like a lot of your stuff is really powerful and you can take out. Yeah. So it feels like the equipment you're getting is designed by people that care about you, as opposed to like, Connor, I like how you put it, as opposed to people that were given a contract by the government and, they wanted to make it as cheap as possible to save on the back end, because keeping their Helldivers healthy isn't necessarily the most important thing. But I don't know. I haven't been bothered by it. Can I go off on a bit of a tangent here?
Sure.
I
think we live in a world where we live in
a society.
Since Modern Warfare 2 started this phenomenon.
Yeah.
People will only play one game for like the first 3 months that it is out, and it becomes an obsession. And I think a lot of that turns into critiques and analyses of games that would not exist in like the mid-aughts, and only exist because of the massive amount of people that are there. I can't back this up with any substantial evidence, but it just feels like, for example, we're talking about people complaining about Helldivers, so it's like a meta conversation. I don't know how big that group actually is. And also, like, if we lived in a world where people played 2 or 3 games or had more than one hobby and weren't on the internet all the time, would that filter out all of the just like initial complaints, the knee-jerk complaints? And would we be left with these people there's more legitimate conversation going online? Does that make sense?
It does.
Because it's like game comes out and there's 800,000 people playing it.
Right.
And so it becomes this obsessive thing where it's like, and it's not criticism. It's just like, we need to pick through this game with a fine-tooth comb. And there's like nothing else going on in the entire world.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair. But because I'm sure there are good criticisms out there, it's not that you can't criticize a game when it drops or whatever, but it's just like it feels so I don't know. It feels so it's like to understand certain criticisms of games sometimes you have to be in the context of, well, if you play for 20 hours, you'll understand. If you play nonstop for 20 hours, if you try this meta tactic and it doesn't work anymore, you'll understand. As opposed to, do you just sit down and just play the game, or you have these like other layers of context through which you play the game that are gained through the internet and whatnot, if that makes any sense. Okay, sorry. That was a tangent.
No, it was a good tangent because you made a good point. It's like if we do have, and that's also part of the problem is when it comes to the conversation on Helldivers and the complaints about it, quote unquote, is that they're all complaints that stem from the different habits that other games like Call of Duty has, like Call of Duty, Fortnite, shooter type games that have certain meta, certain ways you play the game and only play that game, want to be applied to Helldivers, but that's not the way that they designed it. So these types of players aren't getting what they want, and so they're making a ruckus about it compared to everybody else who is very vehemently like, shut up. So there's a good cultivation of a good audience with Helldivers.
Okay.
In my opinion, compared to other games.
Yeah. Do you have any new this week thoughts on Helldivers?
Yeah, so the more I think about it, because you actually made a comparison, obviously, to Earth Defense Force, but the more I think about it and the more I play this game, I honestly believe that Helldivers 2 is the new Left 4 Dead.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
In the sense that you have Joel as a director. You don't have an automated AI director, like who would send you out a tank or whatever, but you do have somebody calling the shots on a bigger scale to keep the game new, to keep the game fresh. Not every time I play the game is completely the same. You do have different types of enemies, and I know that's not something that Left 4 Dead did exclusively, but that was also what kept it fresh, with the hunters and the boomers and stuff like that, and even then, like sometimes I call like the big grub terminids who spit at you. Like when I started playing, I was calling them boomers because they because they blew up, they spit at you. But Helldivers has more similarities to Left 4 Dead than I think most people are thinking about, and I think that serves in its favor because there hasn't been a game since Left 4 Dead that people have enjoyed this much when it came to its co-op gameplay. Because we've tried Evolve, we've tried Back 4 Blood, we've tried to an extent Redfall and other things, but I just think that this is that much like, and this is a more extreme comparison, but much like Ocarina of Time was like the benchmark for specific type of game, and everybody is kind of like, oh, like, that game is best, and then the next one was Breath of the Wild. Like, it's now far into the future that next injection of that style of game is now popular again. So Left 4 Dead and then Helldivers 2. So at least that's my opinion. At least that's what I keep feeling. And it's weird that I keep thinking this because I didn't play Left 4 Dead excuse me, a ton. Like, I played it definitely enough, but I didn't play it obsessively like the early days of Steam and whatnot. But that was something that I was just thinking about when it came to Helldivers last week or so I've been playing.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a crazy thought because I think Helldivers, because Left 4 Dead is PvP, I think it's a harder genre to catch on.
Yeah.
Because you have to create a system wherein not only do you have for like human character, it's asymmetric where the both teams fighting each other, their gameplay mechanics work differently. And also Left 4 Dead had almost a MOBA quality to it. It was really unique, Left 4 Dead. Almost a MOBA quality to it because you had the zombie NPCs that the zombie players could like use and manipulate to get to the human players. But yeah, Helldivers is a really standard third-person shooter that is injected with good visuals, really like segmented mechanics where you have to press buttons to do everything, and it's got that really neat ambience around it where you're on a ship and you can see in the sky and all that stuff. And I think that's an easier genre maybe to build off of. Not an easy game to develop, but an easier genre to build off of because it is just 4 people on one team shooting enemies, right? Helldivers is, like I just said, is much bigger than that. But anyway, okay. Well, do we have anything else we want to say about Helldivers before we talk about other games?
The new Battle Pass or the Battle Pass expansion is coming out on the 14th.
Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, Thursday.
Alrighty.
So new stuff coming.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Good looking new stuff.
Cool. I'm glad.
I saw a pistol grenade launcher, which I am excited for. Because that is going to be chaos.
Every time in Helldivers, every time I call in the Eagle and the Eagle drops some kind of bomb, all I think of is the beginning of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
This is the end. I mean, just every time.
I was thinking of Tropic Thunder.
Oh, yeah. Mother Nature just pissed her pants suit. Yeah, there's that one. Oh man, Tropic Thunder is so good. It's crazy how good that movie is. Apocalypse Now is also very good, but it is not as rewatchable as Tropic Thunder because you watch Apocalypse Now once and you're like,
it's heavy.
I'm glad I watched
it's
that.
Heavy.
Never gonna watch it again.
Yeah.
Tropic Thunder is like, I could watch this 6 times in a week. It's so good. Okay. What have I been playing anything else? I'm almost finished with my Pro Era 2 video. I've been playing it, talking about it, writing about it. I mean, and I'm almost done with it. I really wish I think I titled the video something like I'm desperate for a better VR quarterback game because I don't think I had this conversation with a friend. I don't think everything can be done better in VR. I think there are people out there that think VR is like the next step in games, which I think is totally wrong. I also think there are people that think everything can be made better in VR, and I don't think that's true either.
No, I don't think so.
So, and one example I've used in multiple conversations with multiple people is like playing as Lucio in Overwatch, which back when I used to play Overwatch. It's like how would you do that in VR? Because you would have to be spinning around so quickly. How would you use your hands? How would you stick to the wall and all that stuff, right? You can do all that with Lucio because you can mash the space bar and press S or S and A while you're on the walls and stuff like that. Way easier than you can if you have 2 motion controllers or something like that. And so the medium of a flat screen I think is a better medium, more effective medium to play as Lucio. And I think with like Madden, VR is never going to replace flat screen football games with the bird's eye view and all that stuff, right? The all 22 view. But I do think that like a VR quarterback sim is something that a first person game couldn't recreate. Because you're looking around with your head, you have to throw with your arm. If you want to lob a pass over the top, if you've got a couple defenders in front of you, you physically have to move your arm and release the ball differently than if you've got a receiver that's going to hit a gap between 2 defenders and you have to nail that gap. You got to throw that ball really quickly. And so your arm has to make 2 different motions there. So that's a physical element that you can't really, and you could do it in Madden. Like if you hold the button down or if you press it, it can be like a lob or a rope.
Yeah.
But I think it's that experience of actually doing it yourself and succeeding and figuring out how to do it in VR makes it where it's differentiated enough that it creates an experience that I don't think can be recreated like on a 2D flat screen. And so it's disappointing when I play something like Pro Era 2, and Pro Era 2 is just so monumentally broken. It's just so insanely broken. And they're a small studio, and I get it. But at the same time, the NFL is one of the biggest companies in the world, and they have the most watched television show every year. There are entire companies who, like CBS and Fox, the year that they have the Super Bowl, if you look at their quarterly reports and shit, they expect that quarter and the year to have a boost because of all the revenue they're going to get specifically from the Super Bowl. Yeah. Because it's not just that day, but it's also the run up to it, and
The lead up,
you get all the ad revenue from everybody trying to buy ad spots. So that's that's a big enough bump that you can actually see it in financial reports. And this company can't figure out like how to fund a team or help out a team so they can make an NFL VR quarterback game. That's not just a complete. It's not Pro Era 2 is not like a complete trash fire, but man, it's broken in some ridiculous ways, and that just makes me sad because it's really cool, and it's a cool idea, and it's something that could work. I was just watching an NFL documentary today, and it had a shot of Tom Brady playing, and Tom Brady, there was a moment where he looked to a receiver and he made a quick hand gesture, and I was like, wouldn't that be incredible if you could do that in VR? If there was somewhere you could look at a receiver and communicate a hot route or do something different with just moving your hands to a specific form. I'm not saying it would be easy to develop that. Maybe it would be easier just to have a floating menu or something. But still, like,
yeah,
I want to live that fantasy. And one of the coolest things in Pro Era 2 is if a defender breaks loose, the defender's running right at you, right? And so it is so satisfying when you have a defender running at you and you're like, oh crap, and you find your outlet receiver and you just lob it to the running back to turn what is about to be a 10-yard sack into like a 6-yard gain. And so when you're able to react and find your receiver, you know your running back's over there because you looked at the play before the snap and all that. It's just, it feels so good. And it's like, okay, now let's build on this. Let me call audibles. Walk a linebacker up to the line and let me check saying he's going to blitz, and let me like check my line to fan or to slide to that side or whatever. Like, let me operate an offense. It can be done. Pro Era 2 does not
I'm
do
going
it.
to say a game. I'm going to say a game that has the basis, like the base formula for a really good VR sports game. All right. Wii Sports. You take baseball. You can play as the pitcher or you can play as the batter. You got golf, you got tennis, and you got bowling. All of those would work insanely well in VR.
Yeah, baseball is actually one that's interesting because there is a baseball game that I've played, and it's interesting because you throw the ball as the pitcher, and if the ball gets hit, then you fade to black and you wake up as the player that the ball is headed toward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it's kind of weird because like if you have to, you're not oriented at, so let's say the guy hits a line drive down the third base line and you have to turn to like your right to pick the ball up the ground, right? The game doesn't always adjust, at least last time I played, doesn't always adjust to that. So if you're turning to look at the first baseman to throw, it's kind of awkward because you really have to like spin around and move your feet. And if you're moving your feet and spinning constantly in VR, it can move you around your room. It can be really disorienting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like they have to figure out a way where you can turn with the analog stick, whatever. But that's not a bad idea. Okay.
I was going to say, yeah, you just limit it to pitcher and batter because I mean, yeah, yes, people love playing the other positions in baseball, but those are the two like highlight positions.
Sure, yeah. Is there anything else we've been playing before we get to news and stuff?
I started Forspoken,
okay, cool.
The full game, because it's been well over a year, and now that the initial opinions have died down, there's more people who are kind of like coming out from behind the corner and going, actually, the game is pretty good. So I started it, and I played a couple hours of it, and I'm enjoying it so far. There are definitely like straight up very dumb things, or because I can't remember if it was a Japanese development studio. So it's Japanese.
I think so.
So there are definite like, these are what we believe. This is what we believe happens in New York City, like type situations.
Sure.
And so initially it's very like, this is not turning out well, or this is just very awkward. It's not like flat out wrong, but it's very awkward. And so when you get past that, I actually going into the world that you're in, not Earth, but the actual world, I find that the dialogue for me is actually pretty good. Only because I kind of take the two main characters at their face value. You have somebody who literally was an orphan, grown up in the streets of New York, and is very slick, fast talking, quick on her feet. And then you have someone else who's kind of like grew up the opposite way, but they themselves are also quick-witted, and so it's kind of a back and forth thing. Yeah. And so I get it more than the initial knee-jerk reactions. I like the gameplay so far. There are some things that are a little awkward, like I think that as cool as the running is and the parkour is, it could stand to be slightly smoother when you hit a wall to run up. Collision detection isn't like kind of lags. It feels like it lags for a second, and then your character is like, oh yeah, I can climb this, and then like goes up.
Oh, that's
so it kind of like when you start moving and you're moving, it's like this feels really good, and then you'll just hit those weird angles, and it's just like stop. Yeah. It kind of reminds me, and I kind of mean this in a both bad and good way. It reminds me, and I know it's stupid to say, it reminds me of a launch title of just any.
No, you're right.
It reminds me of early 360 launch titles, like Dark Sector and
or like Rise
Lost
Son of
Planet.
Rome, where
Rise Son of Rome to an extent,
maybe not in the genre, but because from what I remember with Forspoken was that it really looked good.
Yes,
it looks amazing.
Well, it does.
But it's like they made a tech demo. Yeah, and then they had to figure out how to make a game out of it or something.
So yeah, it's half and half. Like it looks good, like any game you would see as a launch title. Condemned is another one. It's like Condemned. It's like it looks good, but it's also off. So it's like character models. Like there are times where character models look really good, but also sometimes those character models are like, oh, you guys are still figuring this out. Mm-hmm. Like
interesting.
So I think it has this kind of charm because of that that I'm getting into, but I'm about to reach the actual, like, I can explore the open world soon when I play. But so far, there's nothing, egregiously terrible about it. It's, just a little awkward. You have like I forgot her name already. Elfie. You have her character when she's, in New York trying to get out of the city. It's like, okay, I have my bag of money. We're leaving tomorrow. What's my plan? And literally, like, her plan is on a cardboard on the wall. It's like, this is literally step by step what I have to do. And she's trying to keep it secret. And it's just, okay, that's weird. It is funny and a little, I'm gonna use the word again, awkward to have like a character who is speaking to these other characters who are from like, middle age-esque high fantasy area. And it's like, hey, I need some place to crash. And the person is just staring at them like, what do you, oh, I need to sleep here. Oh, okay, cool. And that culture shock.
Yeah, the fish out of water type.
Yes. And I understand it, and it does work, but also at the same time it doesn't.
Is it happening constantly?
At the start, yes.
Okay. See, I can see how that could get, because it's like, we get it. She's a fish out of water. Gotta make the same joke over and over again.
Yes. And I feel like just me as an actual living person, by that point, I would understand, oh, I can't speak like this.
Sure.
I have to
adapt somehow.
Yeah. But otherwise, I'll report back unless I so happen to, in a week, end up getting Dragon's Dogma 2 and dropping everything for that.
I have seen the character creations in that game. and that looks insane. Which you can use the character creator right now?
You can download it and use it right now.
Is it a pre-order thing?
No, it's free, and whoever you create, that is, you can, if you want to, take that into the main game.
What a way to hook people.
Yeah. Not only that, but you can create your pawns as well.
Oh man.
So you can do both and take them into the main game.
I've seen a lot of crazy stuff from that
very
character
cool
creator.
stuff.
Some really cool stuff and some really ridiculous stuff. Yeah. I saw Leon, and it was like they took Leon out of Resident Evil 4.
It's that RE engine. fun, man. But yeah, no, I was playing with it a bit, but I decided to like, I'll just do this when the game comes out because I'm impatient enough that I'm like, well, I'd want to play now, So
that's a game. Dragon's Dogma 2. I have not looked into it. I hope it's good, but I'm not personally. I haven't personally been excited for it. Mm-hmm. But I do wonder, is this going to be one of those sneaker this game? Yeah, it's just it's the best game this year. Whoa, out of nowhere. I don't know.
Probably gonna be.
It might be, yeah, because I have so many just throughout doing my own job and being friends with specific individuals. Are so they will die by how good the first Dragon's Dogma is. And it went over my head, went over my head. I just never got to it.
Yep, same here.
Never got to it. Yep. And so, so this one it definitely seems like, okay, we are at a point in a year where I don't have a ton going on, so I might be able to dive in.
I got to be at Outer Worlds. That was the other game that I've been playing, Outer Worlds.
That old game.
Still very good. Outer Worlds, still very good. I'm getting close to the end. I love how well written the game is. I won't talk about it too much because we're almost done. But I mean, we're almost to the news. But yeah, extremely well written. Maybe I'll talk more about it next week. Okay, anything else we want to say before we hit the ad?
I think we're good.
Okay, hitting the ad.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server. To get through the end of this episode,
I got the black lung pop.
I was going to say, if Richard dies mid-episode, I'm going to finish my point, and then I will call the police.
Get your shots, people.
Not until I finish my point. It depends on how good of a point.
It's ironic too because
no, it's fine.
2 months ago, I went to go get my flu and COVID shot, and they were out of COVID shots, and I was like, "Well, just give me the flu shot. I'll get the COVID shot later." And I just never got back to it. And I don't know if that's what it was 2 weeks ago, but it sure felt not normal.
Yeah, a lot of people.
And so I'm very fine right now. Believe me, I'm very okay. But
you just got that. you just got the black lung pop.
Yeah, which
Richard, you've been working the mines for 2 days. I've been working for 40 years.
Man.
Okay, a WB executive has said some interesting stuff about video games.
You can say it.
About video
Stupid
games. Shit. Speaking at a Morgan Stanley conference, WB's CEO and president of global streaming and games, JB Perrette, spoke about WB's recent games business. He spoke about WB's 4 tentpole franchises, Mortal Kombat, Harry Potter, DC, meaning DC Comics, and Game of Thrones, saying, quote, "We think our gaming business is a meaningful differentiator for us. We see the world, whether it be VR devices, the Vision Pro, the virtual worlds. Look, who knows how exactly it evolves, but certainly those types of platforms are only going to increase in scale and adoption, and having 11 owned studios where we're not obviously just a publisher of games, but we're actually a developer of games, we think is a differentiated asset for us. The challenge we've had is our business historically. Our business has been very AAA console based. That's a great business when you have a hit like Harry Potter. It makes the year look amazing. When you don't have a release, or unfortunately, we also have disappointments, as we just released Suicide Squad this quarter, which was not as strong as it. It's very volatile. I'm killing this. I apologize. Continuing. The opportunity is to take those 4 franchises and develop a much more holistic approach, particularly around expanding into the mobile and multi-platform free-to-play space, which could give us a much better and more consistent set of revenue. Secondarily, live services, rather than just launching a one-and-done console game. How do we develop a game around, for example, a Hogwarts Legacy or Harry Potter? That is a live service where people can live and work and build and play in that world in an ongoing basis.
I like
I'll go ahead and give myself a cha-cha.
The cha-cha.
We're falling apart here.
Sorry.
Okay, so no, you're fine. I will stop making fun of you.
No, I tried to get it out before I start talking because I'm just going to have to get, buddy.
Because I was just worried for you the whole time.
Thank you.
I'm stressed and I can't read.
Cover it up. Cover up my coughs with a cough like button.
Okay, so there was a lot in there. I have some interesting thoughts.
A lot of stupid shit in there.
So you guys can go first, and then we'll discuss. So go ahead if you guys have thoughts off the bat.
This is the first time.
You know who really has like a good pulse on what's like relevant and doing really well in the gaming industry? People who don't play video games.
Yeah, and it's very
they're just nailing it every single time.
Yeah, and it's very obvious that this person doesn't know anything about the industry that they're in, because they are just throwing around buzzwords. They are throwing out things that sound good to them on a business level.
Yeah, sure.
But not as a why that business is successful or why these franchises are successful. And it's very weird because they name very specific games, which is, I mean, what was it? The 4 tentpole franchises, which would be Mortal Kombat, Harry Potter, DC, which those three I understand to an extent. But then they throw out Game of Thrones, and it's like, what? Like,
yeah.
There's never been a good Game of Thrones games. There's actually only been 2, and they've both been awful.
And the other thing I want to mention before we dig into this quote more is also WB delisting Adult Swim games.
Yes,
which is more of stupid WB's like leaning down, like not leaning down as into like lean over, but to like lean out or whatever, to like weaning out. Thank you. Which is just fucking ridiculous. David Zaslav is one of the most obnoxious, just
incompetent
distasteful people. And it's annoying. It's so annoying that WB has made so many stupid goddamn mistakes. And here we are. Yeah, so this quote, it's interesting because here's the thing. I wonder, I asked myself a question this morning when I was reading this or listening to it, because it was only like a 40-minute, it was a questionnaire. And I asked myself a question, like, do shareholders not know the business? I don't own a lot of stock in anything. I'm not Jared Vanett, so, but if I were... And I was going to buy stock in a company or in a business, invest money just in a business in general, you would think I'd want to have a solid understanding of that business. And if I had a solid understanding of that business and I saw this guy talk about VR devices and go straight to the Vision Pro, I would know, okay, he's just naming a headset because the Vision Pro is not made to play video games. And it may not even exist for much longer. Like,
we'll see.
So when we talk about VR, if you're talking about VR headsets that are made to play games, the ones that should come to mind are PSVR 2 and Meta's headsets, not the Vision Pro, which was made to, I don't know, replace your MacBook or something. I don't know what Apple wanted to do with that, except make the world's most incredible headset that you could look at photos on or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's just one thing. Yeah, those 4 tentpole franchises are interesting because I think the only franchise in there that I think has artistically been successful or critically been successful has been Mortal Kombat in the past, 5 years, outside of Harry Potter. Outside of the latest Harry Potter. Other than that, Harry Potter has been a franchise that hasn't done anything before Hogwarts Legacy. It's had some mobile stuff, but I mean,
there was a Wizarding World game for the PlayStation Move, but that wasn't that wasn't specifically Harry Potter.
Yeah, and it also wasn't like, I don't know, not something I would consider a huge tentpole release that you're going to base your your business on. DC, you had one of the greatest trilogies of all time and the Batman
incredible
trilogy.
3 run
and like not very many games. What was the last one?
Gotham Knights.
Arkham
Knight was the last Batman.
Yeah, Arkham Knight was the last Batman. It's not. I think it's probably well remembered. When it came out, it had a lot of problems with it and whatnot. But when you look back on the Arkham trilogy, I think it's probably one of the most like solid trilogies front to back ever, like including movies. Like there really isn't a game in there that's just terrible. And we could discuss Arkham Knight another time. But again, so what are you doing with your DC brand now? You did Suicide Squad, which is a game that we know nobody really wanted. And then you have Game of Thrones, which you haven't done a lot with. So it's like you talk about those 4 tentpole franchises. If you're an investor that just knows that these things are popular, it goes through one ear out the other, whatever. You go on with your day and you pump and dump and steal some money from poor people or something. But if you're somebody like us who is obsessed with video games, that's a whole lot of bullshit because like there hasn't been like a big Game of Thrones game ever. So I don't know what he's talking about there. Yeah, and the other thing is, I just want to point out this comparison between, because I wrote this down. I wrote down like a chart. So why was Hogwarts Legacy successful? Is because there was a demand for it, right? It's a specific kind of demand. People were excited for a single player game where you got to make your own wizard, got to be your own kid doing the Hogwarts thing. Just like there are, Knights of the Republic, you get to be your own Jedi, make your own story, kind of. You don't have to be a Jedi, but for the sake of the argument. So it was a single player Harry Potter game. The experience was finite, so it's easier to sustain because you don't have to keep having people play money, and it reviewed pretty good. Compare that to Suicide Squad, which is a game no one wanted because it was when I say no one wanted, I'm being partially facetious. But I think it's an IP that doesn't really fit like a co-op generic shooter. And it's live service, and people aren't as enthusiastic about live services. So it was trend chasing. That's harder to sustain because you have to keep monetizing it somehow, which requires constant monetizing of an audience. And it also means you're going to be in competition with other live services. And what we've seen is that other live service people do not jump between live services all the time. I don't think that's happening. I think people play Counter-Strike, they play Dota 2, they play Fortnite, they're on Roblox. I don't think a ton of people throughout a week or throughout a month are hopping between those services doing a bunch of different shit. They do one thing and that's it. And that's fine. So when you try to get in there, but where they will hop off, I think, is for finite, smaller experiences. So when a single player game comes out, I think the people playing Roblox will hop off and they'll play a single player game because that single player game's finite. It's going to take a month. It's over. They're right back to Roblox, whatever. As opposed to a game that's going to have to siphon away the time that they spend in those platforms, right? Which that's the market Suicide Squad was in. And it didn't have to be. And of course, Suicide Squad didn't review well. So you have these two games, but you put them on the same level. You talk about, well, we had Harry Potter and it was successful and that's good. And then we had Suicide Squad and it wasn't successful. Oh, well, without any of the context about why those things were successful and what the reaction was. And I don't know who was in the room. I don't know how many people. There was just an interview between the JB Perrette and the interviewer. But I would go ahead and put some money down that not a single person in that room understood that dichotomy. And that drives me up the freaking wall because we're talking about the president of one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, and their knowledge and the ability to contextualize this information is at a flat zero. Anyway, Connor, you had a point you were going to make?
Yeah, I was going to say, one, wholly surprised he didn't say like they need to upgrade their quality to like a quadruple A gaming company. And two, I would argue that they know the business, they don't know the industry. And I would say that those things are entirely different. Knowing the business is knowing, IP acquisitions, stuff like that, seeing which IPs are trending and trying to get a hold of those. The actual industry itself is why those things are the way they are. That makes sense.
No, that makes sense, and okay. I think you're right. But I do wonder how much. I don't know. This question has popped into my head. Like, how much do investors understand? Because it was the same thing with Yves Guillemot when he said Skull and Bones was a quadruple A game. It was like, if you know anything about video games, you know that was just it just fell out of his mouth. It meant absolutely nothing. But if you're an investor,
doubling down on that because he almost called it a AAA game.
Yeah, and if you're an investor, wouldn't that bother you that you're investing money in a company and the CEO just kind of makes shit up on the fly during an earnings call? I don't know. But do they realize that? Do they understand that? Do they have the context to understand that a quadruple A game does not exist and does not even make sense, and especially in the context of Skull and Bones? I don't know, man. It's just the people that are at the people that are at the major levers of power in these companies are not video game people. It's the same thing with Amazon, where it's just they don't. Yeah, Connor, you're right. I think they, they see the food on the table, but they don't understand the ingredients, and so it's like they just kind of make assumptions, and they hope that whatever they put on the table, people eat, and they go from there. And it's frustrating because if you understood the ingredients, you could, I think, make a sustainable business, and you wouldn't have to lay off people all the time. But that's not the industry that we're in. And we're going to get into another quote that has some of that in it. But Richard, was there anything popped into your head that you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, I'm just in agreement with what you said. Like there are very extremely obvious surface level reasons why these games are successful or unsuccessful, and some of it is also just hubris from Warner Brothers' side, especially when it comes to DC specifically, because ever since 2009's Iron Man, they've been trying to capture the coattails, at least grab onto what Marvel has specifically, and they keep 3 different times now in the last 5-6 years have tried to shove Suicide Squad down our throat with 2 different movies and a game.
Yeah.
And although it was created by one of the formerly one of the best developers out there,
I think still is probably.
I think they could be, but their lead is gone now. Sefton Hill is gone. Unless somebody can well, now they have to prove themselves again. And Suicide Squad, I did play it, some of it, and I do think it was a good game. It's just marred with so many things that are not attractive to the type of person who wants to play that game. And that's, on one side of the spectrum, whereas the other, of course, is the Harry Potter experience, where people have been clamoring for the ability to explore Hogwarts in a more in-depth way rather than see it through a film lens, especially as their own character. And that was attractive to so many people, especially those who didn't play video games. And I think that's particularly why it sold so much, because they were getting those individuals who don't play games who have that interest in the world of Harry Potter. But all of these executives and they want to see money from somewhere, and if they keep killing these things, especially the Adult Swim video game line, then
that just sucks. It's just so,
and that sucks. So I'm not as, I hate delisting stuff, and I'm not as hard on it as a lot of other people are, because I cannot, Spec Ops: The Line, I understand licenses, etc.
I don't want nuance.
I know.
We landed on the moon.
I get it. But I don't think there's a reason to take these games specifically down.
Yeah.
There might be some. Well, no, not even, because Warner Brothers owns Cartoon Network, right? So they don't have to pay anything for Rick and Morty.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Anyways.
And some of these games were tiny games that came out in 2016 that a lot of them I'd never even heard of. And I was like, you got to take this, you got to delist it?
It's so weird, because I do understand at a certain point of income, your priorities flip. And it's no longer about oh, wow, I have $5 in my wallet. Whoa, cool. It's about your time, and getting that money in that time. So it's just, they may not be making $60-$70 a pop for millions of people, but it is maybe once or twice a month you reach into your pocket and say, oh, $5 bill. Cool. Yeah. It's not, I think there's no reason to do it.
I think, and I don't understand I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I understand the full economic reasoning behind it. Of course. But I think it comes down to more not finding $5, but finding $5 on an expense sheet somewhere and saying, why don't we just cut that off, because then we don't have another that $5 expense. And what you're searching for is like 500 $5 expenses, which you could survive as a company with those expenses, but it would look better because you could do stock buybacks, you could do, I don't know, whatever. I'm just throwing out different shit. It would look better for your company if you weaned away that stuff and either hoarded that capital or invested it in an area you think is going to return a bigger profit, like live service bullshit, or a Harry Potter metaverse game. Which, like, again, what do you mean live and work in a... It makes no sense. JB, you and I need to have a talk, because it makes no sense, man. It makes no sense.
JB on the podcast next week.
JB on the podcast
JB,
next week.
Jack Black.
Facing real questions. Yes, we're gonna have Jack Black. He's gonna be in character Bowser the entire time. I don't know why. Okay, is there anything else we wanna speak on before we go on to an even longer quote?
Nope, we're good. I'm good.
Okay, so Peter Moore spoke with IGN about the future of games. I put what in here because I was trying to remember. I meant to note down what Peter Moore did, and I didn't. So what
he's the guy who got
Electronic Arts,
Halo
Microsoft.
2 tattooed on his arm, and then Grand Theft Auto tattooed on his arm.
I don't remember what his exact.
He ushered in the Dreamcast era with the sports games. He did very well, but that
I don't remember what his job
burned.
titles were, but it very not lucrative. What's the word I'm looking for?
Established? No.
Kind of prolific. There we go. It had an L in there. Prolific. Mm-hmm. I was hoping prolific wasn't the word that made you cough. A prolific career. Okay.
Proactive, maybe.
This is a really long quote, but it's a gigantic meat sandwich, and I cut out as much as I could, but every other sentence is just a banger. So I'm going to read this whole thing. I apologize if it's super long, but when talking about the future of games, Moore said, quote, "A lot of companies, gaming companies in particular, did not exit COVID well, hired too aggressively thinking this thing was never going to wind out again. And of course it did. I always call it the Peloton theory of like, oh, we're forever going to be at home and we're forever going to be playing games and jumping on a bike. Well, no, we're not. Those are the questions that are being asked right now, and it'll all be tied around, do we continue to develop silicon? The role of AI, what does that mean? You can't look away from that. Are these companies willing to go around another round of multi-billion? And at the same time, you're gearing up for another cycle where gamers may not embrace the console and just say, you know what, I don't need this, times are tough, I've got my phone, I'm enjoying what I've got on my phone. There's plenty of games I can play. Failing that, of course, I have my PC or my Mac. I can go do whatever I need to do there. And do I really need to be spending what could be $500-$600 on a bespoke piece of hardware just to play games? So both the companies and gamers themselves are asking this question. What I'm saying is the questions are being asked as they have been for the last 20 years. Are we ready to gird our loins financially for battle and all of the cost of development silicon development? What is it that PS6 can do that PS5 can't that would make people jump from PS5, or the same with Xbox, the same with Switch, right? God forbid it's just incremental. And I think that the companies are also looking at that. What can we do to extend this life cycle? And then if you're Microsoft and you're Phil Spencer, you've got Satya Nadella coming in and saying, all right, what is the future here? And how does this play into the biggest strategy of cloud with Azure, with AI? What are we doing with AI game development? How do you make your games faster, cheaper, with less people? These are all the questions I think are being asked, end quote. So there was a lot in there. I pasted a couple answers together. I apologize. I think we'll put both quotes in the description if you want to read along. I probably should have said it at the beginning. He also mentioned that there was the potential of bringing Halo to PlayStation. Apparently, there were conversations about that back in the day. No idea to what degree those conversations were serious, but they were being had to some degree. Okay, so gigantic meat sandwich there. Mm-hmm. Initial takeaways, go.
I will say real quick, I looked up Peter Moore so I could just find out a little bit more information on him. The first Peter Moore to show up is Peter Moore, the shoe designer. The second Peter Moore to show up is Peter Moore, a serial killer. So he's got to bump those SEO numbers to get him higher up on this list.
Did not know any of that. Thank you, Connor. Richard. Are consoles dying? What do you think?
They could be.
And
this is a conversation I've mentioned several times on the podcast that was around in the mid 2000s, and the talk of a quote unquote one console future, and that console essentially was PC. I mean, I know the designation of like what console and PC is out the window, but if you look at just the evolution of consoles since their incarnation, they've progressively become closer and closer to PC.
Yeah.
And so to the point where even when we, no, I'm sorry, I don't think we talked about it on the podcast. I think it was before PS4 and Xbox One came out, or maybe it was the Pro versions. But I mused the idea of, oh, well, what if it was just a base of some sort? If you wanted that extra graphics card or whatnot, it would
with hard drives.
Well, right, yeah, hard drives, and of course the disc drive now with the PlayStation Slim or PS5 Slim, but that would alleviate a large majority of the initial hurdle for folks who don't understand how a PC works, and that's just having a modular system. That's just, oh, I can play this new game 5 years down the line if I have this extra graphics card or something.
Yeah.
I don't think that spark has been lit for people to start thinking that way. But no, you know what? It has. I'm sorry. I think it has with Steam Deck and the ROG Ally and the new one from I forgot their names, but
there's a couple of them.
But
now.
Because that also to an extent has alleviated that. Oh, I need a PC to play this. What are my specs? No, if it's just that green check mark, you can play it on your Steam Deck. You're good. You know. Just much like Peter Moore said with, why do I need to spend $600? I have my phone right here with a bunch of games on it. Samsung Galaxy S23s or whatever can play supposedly GameCube games just fine, like through a Dolphin emulator. And so when are people going to wake up to that idea of like, oh, I can just do that here and move on from what that was? There's 30 plus years, 40 plus years of games to discover if they want to get into that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there was a lot in that quote. I think
there's a lot,
I do think so. What are the differences between the PC market, the console market, and like the phone market, right? I think one thing that phones and consoles share is that it's relatively simple.
Yes.
If you get a PC, I think people sometimes forget that if you decide to get into PC gaming, it's not just a console. You're going to have an operating system, Windows, which means you're going to have, for the longest time, I had a file that was gone from Windows. And every time I launched a game on Steam, Windows had to reacquire this file. And I could not fix it for the longest time until finally, like 2 years ago, I stumbled across the answer on a random forum somewhere and I fixed it, right? So you're dealing with a computer which has Windows on it. And so it's not a plug and play system like consoles traditionally were, right? And that was the audience that consoles served. Is the market big enough now? Is it savvy enough that there are enough people that could deal with a system like that, or with a form factor, I guess, like that? I don't know. But yeah, you're right in that consoles are getting so advanced that it's like they're becoming closer and closer to PCs. Obviously, we have Windows already, or I guess a version of Windows. Is it just standard Windows on the Xboxes, or is it like a specific?
I think it's a modified window, like a very, excuse me, very modified window. Xbox, I can't.
I've been working on Xbox for 40 years. No, so it's like we already have Windows there, and so it's getting closer and closer, and that's why I've always said, well, then do we need to scale down with consoles? Because that section that consoles fit it's simpler than a PC. You don't have to deal with all the same stuff you have to deal with a PC. the consoles have gotten so complicated, games have gotten so big, you have to install them now, so you really can't do plug and play as much. So that the reason for having a console is like getting less and less. And I think maybe that's what's enticing people to get a gaming PC, because you can buy nice pre-made
for $600-700, yeah.
And it's not like impossible to operate Windows. But it is a different thing, because you like, I don't think you can get a virus on a PS5. I'm sure you can, but it's incredibly difficult. I don't know how many people get viruses on PS5s, as opposed to getting something that comes with a web browser. Well, now you can destroy your game console if you get malware on it or something like that, because you're dealing with a computer, which has an infinite more amount of uses than a console does. But then you look at something like phones. And it's like, what games are you playing on your phone? And back in the day, you could not play like Red Dead Redemption on a phone. You just couldn't, especially flip phones. It was impossible. Now with streaming, you can, because it works. You could stream on your phone, and there are phones that are probably powerful enough that could probably play, I don't know, some form of Red Dead Redemption. I don't know. I know that Resident Evil is already on iPhone.
The Pro, whatever.
Yeah, one of the Pro versions, you can play a couple games. Although I've seen reviews that say it's not that great, but it runs. Yeah. They're trying to. So will there be experiences that when you play it on a console or on a PC cannot, for whatever reason, be replicated on a phone? I don't think that's crazy to think that. Will it happen? I don't know. But I guess the question I would have asked is, why don't these companies scale down? If they're doing such a poor job, if they're so afraid of PS5, and if they don't know about the future, and if they don't know about PS6 or whatever, why not continue to develop PS5? Because we know you make money off the games. You don't make money off the consoles, right? So why not lean more into the thing that makes the console a profitable venture for you? And yes, the console market is not growing, apparently. Generation to generation. Phil Spencer has talked about this. We've heard this from other areas. Peter Moore talked about this, where it seems like the market has plateaued. But that market will always be there for games. That market is currently rebuying games we all bought 10 years ago, you know? So it's like, people will buy games. They may not enter the market. So maybe instead of looking for growth, you look for sustainability through the games that you can put on that platform. And the next console, maybe it's not a huge generational leap, because that's just too expensive. Maybe we've got to the point where you're inching too close to PCs, and the point of a console is becoming obsolete. So you got to draw that back. I don't know. I don't think that's crazy, though. I think you look at Nintendo, graphically speaking, hardware speaking, cannot compete with Sony or PlayStation, but they're doing perfectly fine. Yeah. And they put really good games on their system, and they've got great IP. So it's like, okay, so why are people buying their console? Well, for the games, for Mario Kart 8, you know? So it's like, do you need a console that can hit 8K? I don't know. But if you gave me the choice between a future where Ghost of Tsushima 2 looks just as good as it does now, and it's a really good game, or Ghost of Tsushima 2 can be played at 8K and it's a $400 million budget, and we don't have consoles 2 years after that, I'd much rather have a plateau of like, well, games are just not they're gonna stop looking as good. Consoles are gonna not be as hardware, have as nice hardware in them or whatever, but we're gonna keep leaning into games. And maybe that's the future. I don't know. I kind of want it to be, though, because I find it hard to believe that I don't know. I find it hard to believe that consoles could just go away, and maybe it's just because there's so much pessimism around the industry right now. Yeah. I also like that Peter Moore said the thing about COVID, because we said that. Yeah. God damn it. We said that. We said that during COVID. And here we are. And it happened. And, you know, maybe they planned for that. Maybe they knew we'll scale up when we fire all these people that we hire. Right. Who cares? Yeah. You look like you were going to say something.
Peter Moore.
No, and And of course, Peter Moore is like, yeah, this happened. Why aren't you getting all, Ubisoft, Sony, EA are just kind of like, I don't know why we can't have money.
Right. Okay. I think I said everything I wanted to say about that. I do think I do get dismayed sometimes because I don't like it when people compare. Peter Moore did this a little bit too. They compare how we interact with music or movies with games. Because those are not one-to-one things. Those are not one-to-one mediums. Mm-hmm. Yes, and there's the same thing with Stadia. Yes, we interact with music differently, but that does not mean that it is good for the medium of games to take cues from the music industry and do things similarly. At the same time, Spotify has not, Connor, you know this, Spotify has not been great for people that make music. It hasn't been great for a lot of musicians and bands.
It has been awful for people who make music.
So it's like when we talk about music consumption and we say, hey, Spotify's the future, so let's just do a Spotify for games. It's like, well, wait a second. Isn't that bad? Because we know Spotify hasn't been great for the music industry and for the art of music. And of course, to executives, that doesn't matter because it's not about facilitating like greater human experiences. It's about shareholder value,
of money,
and a golden parachute and an island somewhere off the coast of the Bahamas or some shit. And that's frustrating. So when we have these conversations about like, hey, other forms of entertainment are like this, why isn't games? It's like, well, first, games are different. And second, do we really want to mirror that? Do we really want to recreate that kind of economy in video games? And I don't know. I don't think we do. So I don't like that. Anyway, I think we're good to move on. Anything else you got, Connor? Is there anything you want to say?
No.
Okay. You thought about a joke or something? You're like, I'll let it pass.
No.
Real quick, Activision QA workers have formed the largest game union, I think, in the United States. First reported by The Verge's Ash Parrish. The about 600 employee union at Activision is called Activision Quality Assurance United. They are with the Communications Workers of America. And like I said, now the biggest video game union in the U.S. Speaking with The Verge, Tom Shelley, a technical requirements specialist, said, quote, "This has been an emergent effort that's arisen in the last few weeks in response to the opportunities we've had to freely organize following the merger." That's the merger of Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. Mm-hmm. As a QA worker, we often have the weakest protections and lowest pay of any workers in the industry, even though our work is integral to the success of the companies we work for and the titles we make, end quote. I didn't want to skip over this one.
No, it's great.
Them. Yep, good for them.
I just can't wait for the inevitable news story next week that they've all been laid off.
You say that partially in jest, but partially not. And that's the thing, is unions can't protect you from being laid off. But if you look around the industry, it's amazing all the bluster we got from executives about, people at Activision Blizzard pre-merger trying to form a union. Mm-hmm. And here we are beginning of January or in March 2024 and all the layoffs. And it's like, what do you want employees to do? Because you're not looking out for them. What are you doing? So it's like, yeah, they're going to unionize. They're going to try and do what they can to protect their work and their jobs. And it's like, you make such a huge fuss about it. You bitch and moan. And then the industry keeps on going business as usual, status quo. And tons of people get laid off because of stupid fucking decisions that you made 2 years prior. So you know what? It's like, if you don't like it, if you think unions are bad, well, you should have fixed the industry and made it better before they had a reason to unionize. So zero sympathy there. Yeah, Connor, anything you want to say?
It is very fitting that it's the quality assurance saying how integral they are to into like the success of games, and their union acronym is Aqua. You gotta have water to live.
Richard, anything else?
No.
And we don't have tidbits.
I originally had a tidbit, and then that tidbit went away, and now there's an update to that original tidbit.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm gonna play it sounder. What if I told you In this world, there are bits, and there are tids. And Richard is the only man who can put them together into tidbits. Okay, go.
So I was super stoked when I saw this news earlier because I thought it was one of the biggest pieces of news I have heard recently and a step forward for preservation and emulation. But earlier today, there was a report that came out that the team behind the PlayStation 2 emulator PCSX2 had come to a business decision with Sony to provide technology to emulate PS2 and PS1 games and PS3 games.
Whoa.
Or future endeavors, particularly with the PS4 and the PS5. Yes.
Okay. And that
then I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Then I took that out and I dug a little, I liked the announcement. I could try to find it, couldn't find it. Then I realized that PCSX2 tweeted and was like, we have no idea what you're talking about. Like, we have no idea what this is.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, okay, well, that sucks. And so I dropped that tidbit. Well, update came out that it's, I'll just read it here. This is a rumor now. It's a rumor.
Okay.
Sony is rumored to bring in more PS1, PS2, and PSP classics to PS5 and PS4. Implicit conversions is the name of the group or the business or whatever,
Sure.
is apparently working to bring PlayStation classics to PS5 and PS4 through their Syrup emulation engine after they reached out to Sony to start an experimentation to do more emulation. The Our Team section on their LinkedIn page states that right now we're working on bringing games to the original PS1, PSP, PS2, PlayStation 4, PS5, Switch, and Xbox. Their LinkedIn page also states that they have in business with partners and publishers including Disney Interactive, Bandai Namco, Square Enix, Konami, Capcom, Team 17, and Ben Studio. So that's all we got right now.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. And that's a new thing?
Yeah. So okay. So this team what was it called? Implicit conversions apparently are several people from the PCSX2 team who left.
Okay.
That's according to the PCSX2 team. Right. They came out and were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. These are from people who used to work with us.
Okay.
Now they're doing this. So,
all right.
But this is all rumored stuff.
A lot of stuff in the air. But that'd be interesting.
But that is just like that famous quote from I say famous, but famous to me from Gabe. It's like, how do you stop pirates? You give them a better deal than what they're getting.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's not verbatim, but yes, why it's great to do emulation, but if you do it well compared to the official source, why not go to them and be like, hey, we have this cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
You get a piece of the pie that you are no longer getting,
exactly.
And everyone else gets their thing. And very simple.
And people joke about, this, there's ads. I guess I'm going on the salty seas again. But pirating is not easy or convenient, not for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so it's like, if you're a company like Nintendo and you're so ostensibly terrified about piracy, wouldn't it not be easier just to put some games up on your store, price them at a reasonable price, whatever you think? Doesn't need to be $60, but reasonable price. And then how many people that, I don't know, you hear about it that a lot of times piracy, even if people can buy things, it's not going to stop piracy because people that pirate things aren't going to buy it anyway. But even with that, if you make things more available, I do think that there's at least a chance that some people may go, oh, you know what? I'll drop $15 for this game because I don't want to spend 2 hours finding a copy of it online or whatever. I could just, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there also a study that showed that people who pirate stuff tend to also buy the thing if it's
piracy, while I'm sure it's an issue especially for smaller creators or game refunds, which I think is sort of in the same arena but not necessarily the same sport, there are issues. But when we're talking about giant companies and stuff like that, I don't know if they're Game of Thrones. You often hear Game of Thrones was the most pirated show of all time, but it was also one of the most successful shows of all time.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know what kind of impact does piracy really have on a company's bottom line? I think they have to make that. It's a lot like when companies complain about theft, when like retail outlets complain about theft or whatever. And it's like, yeah, they make it sound a lot worse than it actually is, because they're also not paying their employees as much as they could be paying them or whatever. So it's like, yeah, theft is bad for certain people, but when we talk about the Nintendos and PlayStations of the world, I find it hard to believe that their business is really threatened by piracy. Anyway, okay, anything else we want to say before we end this one?
Video games are cool.
Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse. And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.